All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going deep into female sexual anatomy.
Sounds good?
And, we have a great resource for this.
Yeah.
A YouTube video by Dr. Rena Malik. She's a urologist and pelvic surgeon.
Oh, wow.
And she does a really fantastic job breaking down this topic.
Okay.
Which, to be honest, I think it's a subject everyone should really understand better.
Oh.
Whether you identify as female or not.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's get into it.
Absolutely. And Dr. Malik, she kicks things off by talking about how genitals develop.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. Did you know that, like, early on,
Yeah.
male and female fetuses actually have the same building blocks for their genitals?
That's incredible. So, I mean, even though they end up, looking and functioning very differently,
Yeah.
the clitoris and the penis are actually built from the same, basic blueprint.
That's right.
I mean, this totally changes my understanding of how male and female bodies develop.
Yeah.
You mentioned homologous structures.
Okay.
Can you tell me more about what that is exactly?
Yeah, so early on in fetal development, there's this structure called the genital tubercle.
Okay.
And it's the same in all fetuses.
Gotcha.
And around 10 weeks, things start to change
Okay.
based on genetics. So it's like you have the same foundation for a building,
Right.
but then you choose to create either like a skyscraper or a cozy cottage.
Okay.
Different outcomes. Same starting point.
I like that analogy. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we're all starting from the same blueprint, and then genes kind of take over to guide the process.
Exactly.
Cool. What are some examples of these, twin organ?
Sure. So besides the clitoris and penis,
Yeah.
the labia majora in females,
Okay.
which are the outer lips of the vulva, those are actually homologous to the scrotum in males.
Oh, wow.
So again, same origin, different paths.
That's so interesting. I never thought about it that way,
Yeah.
but it really highlights how connected male and female anatomy is.
Absolutely.
Dr. Malik mentioned that the word clitoris comes from the Greek word for key,
Right.
which kind of hints at its importance.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. What makes the clitoris so significant?
Well, the clitoris is way more complex than I think most people realize.
Okay.
It's not just the visible glands, it's this whole intricate structure that extends beneath the surface.
Huh.
It actually has a structure very similar to the penis,
Oh, wow.
like with a shaft, a hood that's analogous to the foreskin,
Okay.
and even erectile tissue.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so the part we see is just the tip of the iceberg.
Literally. So, the penis, it becomes engorged with blood during arousal.
Exactly.
Wow. This really highlights how important clitoral stimulation is for female sexual response, then.
Yeah, definitely.
Makes sense. I'm realizing now that I never fully understood the clitoris and its complexity.
Right.
But the clitoris is just one part of the vulva, right?
Right.
What are the other, key structures that we should know about?
So the vulva includes the labia majora, which we just talked about,
Okay.
and the labia minora, the inner lips.
Mm-hmm.
These structures are also important for sexual sensation.
Gotcha.
And it's crucial to remember that the vulva has 3 distinct openings.
Okay.
The urethra for irrigation,
Right?
the vagina for intercourse and childbirth,
Uh-huh.
and the anus.
Okay, so it's important to understand that these are separate systems with different functions.
Exactly.
I'm guessing a lot of people might not be clear on that distinction.
You'd be surprised. Clarity is key when we're talking about anatomy.
For sure.
And speaking of areas that need clarification,
Yeah.
let's move on to the ever-so-mysterious G-spot.
Yes. The G-spot,
Hmm.
Dr. Malik mentioned that it was identified in the 1940s
Right.
and is located on the anterior wall of the vagina. But is it really a magic button for pleasure, as some people believe?
Not quite.
Okay.
It's more accurate to think of it as an area rich in nerves,
Okay.
rather than like a specific button you can press.
Right, right.
But what's interesting is that there's a gland located nearby called the Skene's gland,
Okay.
which is thought to be homologous to the male prostate.
Hold on. A female prostate?
Yeah?
That's fascinating. What's the connection to the G-spot?
Well, this connection to the prostate might explain why some women experience pleasure from G-spot stimulation.
Okay.
However, it's important to remember that clitoral stimulation is essential for orgasm in most women.
So while the G-spot can be a source of pleasure for some, it's not the be-all and end-all of female orgasm.
Exactly. And focusing solely on the G-spot can actually be detrimental.
Oh.
Because it can lead to, like, unrealistic expectations.
Right.
And even feelings of inadequacy if someone doesn't respond in a certain way.
Yeah, for sure.
Dr. Malik really emphasizes that While some women can achieve orgasm through G-spot stimulation alone,
Yeah.
for most women, clitoral stimulation is key.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like there are a lot of misconceptions out there about female anatomy and pleasure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to have these open and honest conversations about these topics based on, accurate information and a deeper understanding of how our bodies work.
Absolutely. And this knowledge isn't just for women, it's for everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
Partners, friends, family members, everyone can benefit from understanding this.
Totally.
Which is such a crucial aspect of human anatomy.
Absolutely. It's about breaking down barriers and opening up conversations that have been taboo for far too long.
Yeah.
And it's about, empowering individuals to advocate for their own pleasure and well-being.
I love that.
So, with that in mind,
Yeah.
let's dive into a little more detail about some of the specific structures we've been talking about.
Sounds good. Let's start with the clitoris, since it seems to be like a key player in this whole conversation.
Okay.
What else should we know about its structure and function?
Well, one thing that might surprise you is that the clitoris actually has legs, so to speak.
Legs.
Yeah, they're called the crura,
Okay.
and they extend internally along the pubic bone.
Huh.
They're made of erectile tissue, just like the shaft of the clitoris,
Oh, wow.
and they fill with blood during arousal.
So the clitoris is even bigger than we initially thought.
Right.
It's like this whole network of sensitive tissue.
That's right. And there's another part called the bulb,
Okay.
which sits beneath the labia minora.
Uh-huh.
It also contains erectile tissue and contributes to the overall swelling and sensation during arousal.
Wow, this is truly fascinating. I
Yeah.
had no idea about these hidden parts of the clitoris.
Right.
It makes me think about how much emphasis is often placed on the visible parts of our bodies,
Yeah.
while the internal structures, which are equally important,
Yeah.
remain hidden and often misunderstood.
That's such a good point. And it speaks to a larger issue of how we view and talk about bodies in general.
Right.
Focusing solely on what's visible can lead to a very limited understanding of how things actually work.
Totally. So if we're thinking about the clitoris as this complex, multi-part organ, how does that change our understanding of sexual pleasure?
It means that stimulation of the clitoris can involve much more than just the glands.
Okay.
The crura, the bulb, the entire clitoral network contributes to sensation and arousal.
Gotcha.
This opens like a whole world of possibilities for exploration and pleasure.
That's so empowering. It takes the pressure off of finding one magic spot
Right.
and encourages a more holistic approach to intimacy and pleasure.
Exactly. It's about understanding the full landscape of the body and appreciating its intricacies.
I love that.
And speaking of landscapes, let's zoom out a bit and talk about the vulva as a whole.
Okay.
We've touched on the labia majora and minora,
Right.
but what other aspects of the vulva are important to know about?
Well, Dr. Malik mentioned the importance of understanding the different openings of the vulva, the urethra, vagina, and anus.
Right.
Can we talk more about that?
Of course, as we mentioned before, these are three distinct openings, each with a specific function.
Okay.
The urethra, which is located above the vaginal opening, is responsible for urination.
Right.
The vagina below the urethra is the canal that leads to the cervix and uterus. It's involved in intercourse and childbirth.
Right.
And the anus, located further down, is the opening for the rectum, which is part of the digestive system.
It seems pretty straightforward, but I can see how people might get confused, especially if they haven't had access to accurate information or haven't been encouraged to explore their own anatomy.
You're right. It's important to remember that not everyone grows up with a strong foundation of anatomical knowledge.
For sure.
And unfortunately, there's still a lot of shame and stigma surrounding these topics,
Right.
which can make it difficult for people to ask questions and learn about their own bodies.
It's amazing to think about how much we still don't know or understand about female anatomy.
I know, right?
Even in this day and age.
It really is. And that's why resources like Dr. Malik's video are so important.
Yeah.
They help to break down these taboos and provide accurate, accessible information.
Absolutely. So now that we have a better understanding of the clitoris and the vulva in general, what about this mysterious G-spot?
Okay.
You mentioned that it's located on the anterior wall of the vagina. Can you pinpoint its location a little more specifically?
Sure. Imagine you're reaching into the vagina with your fingers, paw up.
Okay.
The G-spot is said to be located about 2 to 3 inches inside,
Okay.
on the front wall or the wall closest to the belly button.
Gotcha.
It's often described as feeling slightly raised or spongy.
So it's not a clearly defined structure,
Right.
but rather a specific area within the vaginal wall.
Right. And as we discussed earlier, it's thought to be near the Skene's glands, which are sometimes referred to as the female prostate.
Right.
This proximity to the Skene's glands might explain why some women experience pleasure from G-spot stimulation.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm still a bit unclear on why some women find the G-spot pleasurable
Yeah.
while others don't.
Uh-huh.
Is there a scientific explanation for this, like variability?
That's a great question, and one that researchers are still trying to fully understand.
Okay.
There's no definitive answer yet, but there are a few possible explanations.
Okay.
One theory is that individual anatomical variations might play a role.
Okay.
For example, some women may have more nerve endings in that area than others.
So it's not a matter of whether or not you have a G-spot,
Right.
but rather a matter of how sensitive that area is for each individual.
Exactly. And another factor could be the technique used for stimulation. Makes sense? What feels good for one person might not feel good for another.
That makes sense. It highlights the importance of communication and exploration in intimate relationships. What works for one person might not work for another, and that's perfectly okay.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to the importance of having a holistic understanding of female anatomy and pleasure. It's not about finding one magic button,
Right.
but rather about appreciating the complexity and individuality of each person's body.
I love that perspective. It's about embracing the journey of discovery and understand that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to intimacy.
I couldn't agree more. And speaking of journeys of discovery,
Yeah,
we haven't talked much about the role of the clitoris in orgasm.
right.
Dr. Malik highlights this as a key point in her video.
Okay.
Why is clitoral stimulation so important for female orgasm?
Well, from what we've learned so far, it seems like the clitoris, with its network of nerve endings and erectile tissue,
Yeah.
is the primary source of sexual sensation for most women?
Yeah,
Is that accurate?
that's right. In fact, research suggests that the vast majority of women require clitoral stimulation to achieve orgasm. It's not just a matter of preference, it's a physiological reality.
So the idea that women can easily achieve orgasm through penetration alone is a myth.
Definitely a myth.
Wow.
While penetration can be pleasurable for many women,
Uh-huh.
it often doesn't provide enough direct stimulation to the clitoris to trigger orgasm.
That's so important to understand. It challenges a lot of societal assumptions about female sexuality
Yeah,
and highlights the importance of clitoral stimulation in achieving sexual fulfillment.
exactly. And this knowledge can be incredibly empowering for both women and their partners.
For sure.
It allows for more open communication, more focused attention on what feels good,
Uh-huh.
and ultimately, more satisfying sexual experiences.
It's amazing how much we've learned from just one YouTube video.
I know, right?
Dr. Malik has really cracked a lot of valuable information into her presentation.
She really has, and it's a testament to her passion for educating people about these important topics.
Yeah.
So with all of this newfound knowledge, what are your biggest takeaways so far?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that female anatomy is far more complex and fascinating than I ever realized.
Yeah,
I'm also struck by how much misinformation and misunderstanding there is out there,
right.
even about basic anatomical facts.
I agree. It underscores the importance of continued education and open dialogue.
For sure. What else stands out to you? I'm also really appreciating this idea of shifting our focus from finding one magic button
Yeah,
to embracing a more holistic understanding of pleasure.
yeah.
It takes the pressure off and opens up the world of possibilities for exploration and connection.
Beautiful said. And this shift in perspective can have profound implications for relationships, self-esteem, and overall well-being.
Absolutely.
It's about moving away from shame and embracing the beauty and complexity of our bodies.
Absolutely. And it all starts with knowledge and understanding.
Exactly. And speaking of understanding, one final point I'd like to make is that understanding female sexual anatomy is not just about pleasure,
Okay.
but also about health and well-being.
That's a great point. Dr. Malik also touched on that in her video.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on the connection between anatomy and health?
Of course, knowing your anatomy empowers you to take better care of yourself.
Okay.
For example, understanding the different parts of the vulva
Yeah.
can help you identify any abnormalities or changes
Right.
that might require medical attention.
Okay.
It can also make conversations with your healthcare provider more informed and comfortable.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about being proactive and advocating for your own health.
Exactly. And this knowledge can also be helpful in preventing and treating common issues
Okay.
like urinary tract infections, yeast infections, and sexually transmitted infections.
It seems like there's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Knowledge leads to awareness, which leads to better self-care and ultimately better health outcomes.
Precisely. And it all starts with curiosity
Yeah.
and a willingness to learn.
Absolutely. So what's the one thing you'd like our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I think the most important takeaway is that Female sexual anatomy is a source of wonder, pleasure, and power.
Yeah.
It's worthy of respect, exploration, and celebration. And the more we understand about our bodies,
Yeah.
the more empowered we become to live fulfilling and healthy lives.
That's such a beautiful message. Dr. Malik's videos has definitely given us a lot to think about and a lot to appreciate.
Yeah?
I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this fascinating topic.
We certainly have. But hopefully this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue learning and exploring.
It definitely has. So on that note, we'll leave you with a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
Now that you have a deeper understanding of female anatomy,
Yeah.
how might this knowledge change the way you approach intimacy, pleasure, and self-care?
It's a question worth reflecting on, both individually and with your partner.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey of discovery.
Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.